So hello, we are going to begin the session. For those who are online and those in person, please turn on your headphones on the channel 1 for following us. I hope you can hear well. So it's an honor to join today to reflect on how to close digital divide by universal access and acceptance. This session aims to explore strategies for expanding high-quality internet infrastructure and underserved communities through multi-stakeholder partnerships. It will also address opportunities and challenges of universal acceptance to foster linguistic diversity online, aiming at discussing actionable solutions for regional implementation. So I'm Fabio Seni. I'm General Research Coordinator at CETIC.br, which is a department for NIC.br, and I will be moderating the session. CETIC is a think tank linked to the Brazilian multi-stakeholder internet governance model and represented by NIC.br and CGI.br. And we are also a UNESCO Category 2 center that support Latin American countries and Portuguese-speaking countries in better developing international and comparable indicators on the access and use of the internet. And I would like to introduce Ellen Taylor, who is policy analyst from the Government of Canada, and will be our virtual moderator. So I would like to remind that this session is hybrid in an hybrid format, and after a short interventions from the panel, we will open the floor for questions and comments from you here in the event or online. So just to begin, I would like to mention that digital divides are increasingly relevant topic today. We can say for sure that it affects directly the citizenship and the way people can participate in economy and in societies. And it also makes vulnerable population less resilient to online risks. So we can say about frauds and misinformation, disinformation. And especially in a moment where there is AI and much of the models on AI are trained use data, digital divide are key to not creating biases. And traditionally, connectivity and digital divide has been discussed under the layer of infrastructure only. So what's the coverage of broadband and how internet connections are offered to individuals and organizations. But however, we know that 2 decades of research in the field, we know that the supply side is necessary also to keep in mind, but is not sufficient. So we need to understand the barriers for digital inclusion that comes from the intersection of different inequalities, territory, gender, ethnicity, language, and others. And we also know that the solution needs to take into consideration the other layers of the internet governance, including the logical layer, the transport layer, and the application layer. So that's why we are engaged in this discussion today. And just to mention that among the most relevant conceptual shifts that we have in this recent period is the idea that we also need to take care of meaningful connectivity, not just basic connectivity, but what is a meaningful connectivity, meaning that what is the quality, the frequency of use, the conditions of use that really enable users to fully benefit from digital technologies. And in Brazil, just to mention briefly one single research that we developed in Brazil, although we know that almost 90% of the population has some connections with the internet and use in a sense, only 22%, according to our estimates, have a meaningful connectivity, which means that we really need to push the discussion forward. So the idea is to discuss really strategies and actionable solutions to this topic. And we will start by listening our speakers and then open the floor to you for the discussion. I will start with Alison O'Byrne, which is a director of the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development of the Government of Canada. So Alison, please, you have the floor for your first intervention. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Fabio. Much appreciated. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all today and to get the opportunity to speak a little bit about a topic that I know has been close to our heart in Canada for a little while, which is universal acceptance. And it's an issue that I think is really fundamental to building a truly inclusive digital future of the kind that you were just speaking about. As we all know, of course, since we're at the IGF, the internet is the backbone of modern life and of our economic growth. But despite the global reach of internet technologies, access and usability are really still not universal. And one of the major barriers that we've seen is the failure of many systems to support all valid domain names and email addresses, especially those that are in non-Latin scripts or newer top-level domains. So this is the issue that universal acceptance really tries to tackle. It's the idea that all domain names and email addresses should work across every internet-enabled application, device, platform, regardless of the language, the script, or the length. I know it sounds like a very simple issue, and in 2025 it maybe should be, but we still have quite a long way to go on universal acceptance. I want to start off by acknowledging that there is incredible work being done by the technical community that has been done and that continues to be done to reduce the technical barriers to access to the internet. But I think what we want to talk a little bit today about is the role that governments have to play in ensuring that the internet remains open, secure, and interoperable, and particularly in leveraging their power at the international level to help ensure the wide-scale adoption of standards like universal acceptance. So what is the government's role in universal acceptance? There are basically two sort of aspects to it. The first is that governments, of course, help set standards for internet technologies. We operate massive IT infrastructures. We've got websites, we've got portals, we've got e-services, and they interact with millions of citizens every day. And ensuring a linguistically diverse and inclusive online environment to ensure that the interests of our citizens are met, governments really have to work together at both the national and the international levels to help promote and advocate for the advancement of technical work like work on UA standards. Second, of course, governments are also conveners and educators and enablers. They can fund awareness campaigns, they can invest in training for IT professionals, they can participate and collaborate with wonderful international partners like the Universal Acceptance Steering Group or ICANN, and these efforts really help to ensure that there is an awareness and an understanding among developers, administrators, and decision makers about the importance of UA and how to implement it. We have a long way to go, but I think we're pretty optimistic about it. And I know for Canada, we face particular challenges in being able to implement UA ourselves. We have a huge geographic region with a whole lot of layers of government. We could talk about whether it's too many, but that's for a different panel. And so getting everybody to kind of be on board with consistent technical standards can be a challenge. And of course, like many countries, we have an enormous amount of linguistic diversity. Canada has 2 official languages, English and French, but there are 200 other languages, including 70 more Indigenous languages that are spoken in Canada. ICANN is the lead technical organization on universal acceptance, of course, and is actively doing work in this space, and we are really seeking to engage with them, trying to engage with them consistently to support the work that ICANN is doing to really advance the work around universal acceptance, including the current policy development process on Latin script diacritics, which when I started in my job, I had to have explained to me maybe 4 or 5 times to understand, but is basically the principle that you can have different languages supported in the same way. For example, that one diacritic and non-diacritic version of the same domain can still exist, like in our case for .quebec and .quebec, one of which has an accent and one of which doesn't, and that those can both exist alongside each other. I think we recognize that there's lots more to do in this space, but the multi-stakeholder community is really one that has this kind of adaptability and change and innovation as part of its DNA. And since we're working together towards this common goal, I am confident that we'll be able to make change in this space. Thanks very much, everyone, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Alison. Very insightful introduction and how something that are apparently simple can be very changing the way people can access to the internet. And now I'll give the floor to Andrew Lewela, the CEO of the Kenya Network Information Center, KENIC. Andrew, you have 5 minutes for your first interventions, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me start at the very onset by throwing some cold water to the discussion. And I'll do this from a Kenyan perspective, a country at the heart of East Africa in the global south. there can be no UA or trust without a meaningful internet. I'll repeat that. We cannot have universal acceptance and trust without a meaningful internet. This morning, Doreen from the ITU mentioned that we still have 30% of our population globally who are offline. In Kenya, this number is 1.4 million underserved or unserved citizens. Now, in other metrics in Kenya, we have high coverage by the providers. We have high subscription, but very low usage. And why usage is important? Because only when our citizens use the internet in a meaningful way can we then move on to domains, emails, and ensuring that that reflects our languages and our diversity. And in Kenya and most of Africa, the local language is Swahili. So how do we bring the elderly, the youth, into this ecosystem? I'll throw a few barriers and potential remedies that we see, that together we can truly bridge the digital divide. At the top of that list actually is still affordability. Affordability of network plans or internet plans, affordability of devices, and the requisite policies that come with that affordability. I think secondly, we still have limited trust by citizens based on what they hear as part of the internet threats. So cybersecurity threats are still up there. And the whole issue of digital trust. Last month alone in Kenya, the regulators mentioned a 7x growth in DDoS attacks. And a lot of those are AI generated now. So citizens are concerned about that. Secondly, I've mentioned the issue of infrastructure and access. But do the regulators and the policymakers, are they doing enough in terms of streamlining policy to assure citizens of affordability and infrastructure? There's more that can be done there. And finally, on some of the barriers we see is technical expertise around governance and emerging technology. I'm happy that some of our regulators were here and legislators. We need to carry them along in terms of enabling environment. Now, in conclusion, where do we go from here to ensure UA and trust, at least from a Kenyan perspective? I wish to propose that this is what a meaningful internet looks like, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a conversation I think that we have to not only capture, but to associate myself with the minister last evening. We have to be bold in terms of the actions we take as a community. One, we not only have to have a reliable access, but it has to be affordable. I think we agree on that. We also have to ensure that there's sufficient speed and quality. I'm not sure how many of us have enjoyed the internet at the event. I have a bit of issues with the quality. And I say that tongue in cheek. We need to also ensure that we carry along our citizens in terms of digital literacy. Because the language of the internet cannot be and should not be only English. How do you make it Zulu? How do you make it Swahili, Norwegian, and so on? And it has to be relevant content and services that citizens can really participate in. Number 6, it has to be safe and secure, especially for our children. At Kennick, child online safety is a cornerstone of how we take the internet to the youth. It has to be. No harassment, no exploitation. These have to be front and center to ensure that the value can be sustainable. And finally, on this big question of enabling environment, it has to be regulatory, issues of data privacy, innovation, freedom of expression, and finally, the rights. The rights offline have to be the rights online. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we see from a Kenya and East African perspective in terms of potential barriers, but hopefully together we can surmount these challenges. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It was very insightful that you presented in the African perspective, but taking all the main categories from meaningful connectivity that we are considering also in Brazil and other parts of the world, including affordability, which is a key issue, because it's not sufficient to have the service available or coverage if you don't have real affordability and people can use. Of course, language is another key issue that I think the next invited to the session will take care of this topic. So I'll also call online if Phil Steinhauer Mojeko. Phil, are you connected? Can you hear us?
And thanks for that good pronunciation, eh? That was pretty good.
I've studied a lot to try to do. Sorry if I misspelled your name. But Phil is Director in External Affairs at the Indigenous Connectivity Institute. And Phil, you have your 5 minutes for your initial thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try not to get distracted by seeing my face plastered on the screen here, but I apologize I can't be there with you all in person. Very grateful for the opportunity. I'm wearing my orange shirt in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day, which just happened in Canada on June 21st, on the eve of the summer solstice. And we don't want to be relegated to a singular day or month. But my name is Phil Steinhauer Mojeko. Phil Steinhauer Mojeko Nitsiga son Amisquachiwaskaigan Otsinia Egua Moginstisewigian. I'm a member of Onichixquapoan, or Satellite Cree Nation, in Treaty 6 territory. So my name is Phil Steinhauer Mojeko. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, in Treaty 6 territory. And I'm Director of Indigenous and External Relations for the Indigenous Connectivity Institute. And we're an organization that seeks to advance digital equity for First Nation, Inuit, Métis, Alaska Native, American Indian, Native Hawaiian people on Turtle Island and the Inuit Nunangat. And I'm really thankful to be here. I'm building literacy and understanding in the area of universal acceptance. And so I really want to thank the Government of Canada and ISET and my colleagues there for inviting us to participate here and to learn. I'm keen to learn and hear actually from the rest of the people on the panel. I think I have a limited slice of what I can provide here in terms of an intervention. So what does digital equity mean for First Nation, Inuit, and Métis in a Canadian context? And I think a big part of it, I'll lead off with this, given it was just Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada. And we're in an intergovernmental, or we're in an international UN forum here. I think familiarizing with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And we're starting there as a kind of a framework and talking about free, prior, and informed consent for Native people, not just in Turtle Island, but across the world. And that means that there is robust engagement and recognition and acknowledging that Native people are inherent right holders. We're not just stakeholders in this matter, and we need to be not just consulted with. There's a duty to consult from the governments, but there needs to be understanding that we are inherent right holders here, and we have existed on this land forever, and we will continue to. But our organization, the Indigenous Connectivity Institute, really seeks to enhance digital equity by promoting Indigenous owned and operated networks. And that means that Indigenous nations must be kind of at the center of infrastructure decisions in Canada, the United States, with governments in the global north, colonial governments in the global north. and we need to have policies that kind of really work in lockstep with some of the priorities and initiatives that the great array and diversity of nations in Canada have. And that's challenging, but that means a lot of kind of bilateral intergovernmental meetings and a lot of time and effort into relationship building. I really like that idea of meaningful connectivity. And this is something that I would like to revisit. And what does that mean? Speaking for myself from a Nehiawak or a Plains Cree and a First Nation perspective, what does meaningful connectivity mean for our people who are overwhelmingly in rural and remote areas, who still have a lack of access to internet connectivity, let alone broadband? And it's still prohibitively expensive. And the maps that some of the governments use, although not all, are still kind of lacking a quality data in terms of served or unserved areas. So there's also needing to consider fixing of structural and kind of regulatory barriers. And that's particularly with respect to spectrum access, given that many of our communities are in rural and remote areas. And the Indigenous Connectivity Institute, we've really been promoting this idea around access and rights to spectrum. 1 minute left. And we need to ensure that there is ongoing sustainable funding for Indigenous projects in Canada, the US, New Zealand, everywhere. And I think competitive funding models kind of leave communities behind sometimes. And so credit to the government of Canada, who has been working, I think, diligently and upping their relational approach, working with Indigenous communities in Canada, recently opening the Indigenous priority window for spectrum access and potentially having some set-asides for quality bands of spectrum. And lastly, I will say is respecting Indigenous data sovereignty. And that's not just on the mapping model, but that's in terms of digital data and digital data flows through the cables and the airwaves that kind of constitute the internet. And so thinking about Indigenous data sovereignty with respect to online presence is a key thing. And others have mentioned on it, safety, security, and honoring and respecting cultural traditions online. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I really appreciate the time. It's an honor to be here. And thanks to everyone for having us. And I'll pass it on to the next guest. Hi, Exe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. I think you brought very interesting points to the discussion, especially one that is very keen to my work, that is having statistics and measurements on what's happening is key, because otherwise you cannot do policy without knowing where are the gaps, and this for indigenous population is key. So I'll now pass the floor to another online participant, which is Kazar Rumcha, the co-founder of the Urdu AI. Kazar, please, I hope you can hear us well, and you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here on this screen. It's wonderful to see a lot of exciting people here. Assalamu alaikum, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are watching from. I'm Kesar Runja. I'm the co-founder of Urdu AI, and I come from a place where the internet doesn't just buffer slowly, it often disappears when it is needed the most. I come from rural Pakistan, where the digital divide is layered with geography, gender, and sometimes governance failures. The digital divide is not just about fiber optics or smartphone penetration, it's about who is included, who is heard, and who is invisible. A rural girl without access to internet or AI tools is not just offline, she's being locked out of a future. A woman in conservative villages without digital literacy isn't just excluded, she's denied from economic freedom. And when the internet is turned off without digital during the digital turmoil, as it often in my country, entire communities lose connection to opportunity and hope. This is the digital divide I believe we must talk about. At Urdu AI, we bring artificial intelligence down to earth, translated into Urdu, simplified for all, like for everyone without their educational experience background, and simplifying it a very, very down to earth level, a very low level, so everyone can understand. And that has been a very successful practice so far. For now, we have reached our 32 million people every month with our numbers that we see on our platforms: rural youth, housewives, micro entrepreneurs, young people in small towns who now see AI not as as it typically was, as a trait or but as a personal tool. At Wang Lab of Innovation, which we built with the support of Internet Society, is Pakistan's first rural innovation lab. We trained women artisans to digitize their work using uh, tools that we have trained on them. Their women, their younger girls, we have provided them digital tools. So women come to stitch local traditional products, and their girls who we are training on AI and digital marketing help them to sell the product into online world. So kind of creating a mother and daughter due to create a sustainable impact. I think with what we do at a very small level, this is what we see as a universal acceptance look like. It's not just whether the tech exists, but whether it welcomes everyone and how we are incorporating voices into that. But how do we build trust in this digital promise when, in my country, for example, and many others I know, when the internet is switched off during every crisis? How do we tell young people in rural areas, especially girls, the technology is their future when government shut down access every time they fear dissent? Digital access is a right, not a privilege, and when it is denied, especially to these already marginalized, it deepens the divide. It tells young people, rural communities, and women, you don't matter in the digital age. I think trust is foundation of digital development, and it shut downs, it breaks the trust. Uh, we believe here's what we must commit to do: digitalizing localization, technology in our own language, shaped by our realities. We see AI is transforming a lot of things, but we don't see much of the content coming in other languages. As one of our fellow speaker was talking about, how do we ensure that it doesn't just change the lives of many in urban settings or big developed countries, but how do we make sure the most marginalized one are benefiting from AI, especially when language is the biggest barrier? I think we need to focus on rural centric innovation, let villages become hubs of digital creativity, not just a recipient. We see the transformation is going to a lot of places, and I think ensuring that gender focus, inclusion, putting women and girls at the center of the digital policy and programming could change that. And internet infrastructure, as I said, protected from political shutdowns, accessible to all, especially during crisis. Uh, we must change that, and we must enable that. I believe digital equity isn't charity, it's power waiting to be unlocked. When a young person in Pakistan speaks to the newly emerged AI tools in their own dialect, in their own language, we don't just close the divide, we build a new world of opportunities. I have been training hundreds of people through Urdu AI, and I see when people understand something that they could utilize. So it's clearing out the a huge barrier for people who did not have access to Ivy League universities or very high quality schools. But AI as shape of highly intelligent model, a tool in their pocket, could educate them on a lot of tools that they never thought they could learn. So I think there's an opportunity, and I believe we let the govern let us govern the internet as a shared language of empowerment, not as a tool of control, spoken in every dialect, protected in every storm, and felt in every village and community across the world by every woman and child and young person and every person who's from marginalized community. That's my opening remarks for the session. I'm very excited to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much, Kazar. It was a very insightful introduction, and I think you brought AI to the discussion. I think this is something that we might want to comment later. But now, last but not least, I'll pass the floor to Sabrina Wilkinson from the Internet, which is Internet Governance Manager from the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. Sabrina, please, you have the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today, both virtually as well as in person. And it's been really terrific to hear a little bit more about how digital divides manifest across regions and of course have real and tangible impacts on how people live their lives. Today I'm going to be zooming in a little bit to talk about one particular initiative that CIRA's been working on for the last little while that's looking to tackle one very local digital divide in Ottawa, Canada, where many of us at CIRA are working and living. So at CIRA, of course, we're best known for managing the .ca domain, but our mission extends far beyond that. As a non-for-profit, we invest a portion of our revenue each year to help build a safer, more accessible, and more trusted internet for all Canadians. A big part of that is our grants program. Launched in 2014, our Net Good Grants program provides funds annually to support projects that improve digital infrastructure, promote online safety, and advance internet policy. While much of our funding on the infrastructure side has and continues to focus on rural and remote regions, we've also recognized the rising need for investment in urban digital equity. In Canadian cities, the challenge is often less about infrastructure and more about affordability, access to devices, and digital literacy. These barriers can be especially acute for low-income households, even when broadband is technically available. So to mark the 10th anniversary of this program, we launched a new urban-focused initiative in Ottawa called Communify. This 2-year pilot project involved a partnership between CIRA as well as several local organizations, National Capital Freenet, which is a community internet service provider, Ottawa Community Housing, as well as Hydro Ottawa. So together we've created a free community Wi-Fi network serving neighborhoods in Ottawa with some of the highest levels of social inequity. The first phase of this project launched in December 2023, and it brought fixed wireless access to 2 community housing buildings in the city. In just 6 months, about 2,000 unique devices connected to the network, underscoring the need for this type of work for low barrier, no cost connectivity. But Communify, it's, as we've learned or heard about, of course, today, it's about a lot more than bandwidth. With this network in place, we are seeing a real impact or change in the ways in which residents of these 2 buildings live their lives. Folks are gathering in shared spaces where the Wi-Fi is available to, stream videos, connect with friends, colleagues, access health services, e-education, tax clinics, all of the things that, of course, are readily available via an internet connection. For people with mobility or income constraints, that access, and more broadly, but that access, of course, makes a meaningful difference in day-to-day life. CIRA also contributes its firewall technology to this network, which helps protect users from phishing, malware, and other threats as well, which adds a vital layer of trust and safety, particularly for vulnerable populations. Our goal here is to demonstrate a replicable model or pilot, one that can be scaled across the city or adapted by other communities across Canada or maybe beyond. Communify embodies what this program was built to do, to support promising community-led ideas with potential for real measurable impact. recognizing, of course, this is one small example of the, that against all of what we talked about today is there's much more work to be done, but we hope that there are some learnings that can be had both in Canada and elsewhere. And of course, this project illustrates how digital divides are not just about infrastructure gaps. As Andrew and others have noted, they're also about affordability, trust, access to devices, and the ability to meaningfully connect and use the internet in daily life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, for your insightful thoughts. I think from the panel we see that the issue is multidimensional. So we do have, of course, we still need to think about infrastructure when it comes to remote areas and Phil mentioned spectrum and some issues that we still can discuss, but it's insufficient to solve the problem. So we have multiple layers of areas that we can make solutions happen. So we have time now for discussions and questions. I'll check first with Ellen if there's someone online having any comment or question. Please, Ellen.
Thanks very much, Flavio, and thank you to our lovely panelists. Just to note, there's been a great discussion online with some reactions and reflections to panelists' comments as they've come in, particularly concerning really community-driven initiatives for universal acceptance and the multi-stakeholder collaboration that's needed, particularly with governments needing to make it a priority as civil society is really championing these initiatives with the technical community. So there is a question here in the chat, and it came up during Andrew during your remarks, but I think it could be if anyone on the panel would like to reflect on it. So the question is from Emmanuel O'Rourke, a DCAD fellow. Is there a possibility of developing a framework that offers a special internet package policy for all network operators and ISPs to adopt and implement to ensure persons with different abilities have access to the internet to close the digital divide in the global south? So that is the question there, and I'll hand it back to the panel for any reactions and thoughts.
Thank you, Ellen. I don't know if someone from the audience in person want to add some other question or comment. If not, I pass the floor to the panelists. I don't know, Andrew, if you want to start because it's what's directed to you, but any other panelists can also comment on the issue.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for the question. So I'll give the framework that Kenya uses just for consideration. So it's very hard for profit-driven entities like ISPs, telcos, to buy into this kind of framework. Unfortunately, they have different set of shareholders. But we see a role a regulator can play. So for example, in Kenya, the Communications Authority that regulates our space, using the Universal Service Fund, some of the profits from the ISPs are used by the government to bridge this gap for the underserved or unserved areas. So this is one framework that I believe, Emmanuel, could work in your jurisdiction. So where it is not profitable for ISPs to reach, for example, the government will then use some of this money, procure from competitive providers, including community networks, for example, so the smaller guys, to take this infrastructure and to keep the product price competitive or at least useful in terms of allowing usage. So this will be one framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's check if our colleagues online want to comment on something on this. Raise your hand if you, Phil and Kazar. I think Phil is up to comment on that. Please, Phil, you have the floor.
I don't know if this answers the question. However, having some experience working in the United States with their Digital Equity Act, pardon me to take it away from the Canadian context, but there are a lot of shared kind of experiences and it's relevant on both sides of the border. Similar things are happening, but with the Digital Equity Act, there has been increased funding for, and I believe Canada may be doing similar things coming down the pipe for digital navigation, which I think here at the IGF is probably very familiar with some people here. But from what I have seen working in community in Canada and the US, identifying and funding, well, basically identifying those connectivity champions and people who are, you could say, digitally literate or technically versed, at least at a kind of a level 1 or a level 2 kind of capability of troubleshooting, using devices, computers, and accessing or using the internet. But I've seen firsthand in community how these digital navigators can be really excellent guides, as they are navigators who can help multi-generational citizens of a nation actually learn how to send or receive an email, or set up an email address, or how to connect to Wi-Fi, or the differences between cellular and Wi-Fi, and these sorts of things. But even more base in terms of how to using a browser and getting online. So there's an aspect of internet adoption, and you have a connection formed to the internet through a human, a trusted person. This has been an ongoing theme of trust. And so governments working with communities to kind of identify people, individuals who can be your trusted kind of technology and digital stewards and guides in community as a bridge to online inclusion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Phil. I don't know if Alison and Sabrina want to comment, please.
Sure, just
Yes?
maybe super
Yes.
quickly to respond. Thanks, Phil. Very helpful illustrative example. I know in the Government of Canada there's been some work and some efforts in the general direction of sort of digital literacy and ensuring digital skills development, and it's a multi-layered approach, both from the perspective of having, you know, the federal government with responsibility for skills development, and likewise provincial governments with responsibilities for education, and so working together as two different layers of government and other layers of government as well to ensure that there are programs in place. From the federal perspective particularly, again, there's multiple layers to it, as you have digital skills development to try and kind of advance, you know, business adoption of emerging technologies versus skills development of, as you say, trying to teach people how to use a browser so that they can get online. And all of those things have to be captured within the programs. So lots of different programs that are underway in Canada in that regard. Likewise, in the federal government level, I think a huge commitment to ensuring that our own IT meets international standards for accessibility, so that the content that we provide as the Government of Canada is accessible, is available to everyone in a consistent way, and can be accessed by folks with different abilities. But the idea of having kind of digital champions or digital navigators is one that's new to me. So I kind of love this. I'm going to bring this back from IGF and start talking to people about it in our department. I think that's a really clever way to get the community involved.
Thank you, Alison. I think there's someone from the floor. Please go ahead.
Sure. Edmund Chung here from .Asia. For those of you who know me, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, especially have been working on internationalized domain names and universal access and acceptance for a very long time. I really like the way that it's framed, that it is not just about the technicalities of universal acceptance, but also about digital inclusion. It's also about meaningful access and multilingual internet, because I think that is the right way to really frame this issue, because it's not only technical. I'm also really excited to hear from Andrew and Phil that touched on one thing that I think is very important, and I call it, well, not me that call it, but I include this as part of universal acceptance, which is language justice. It is a matter of language justice to make sure that systems support the different native languages that people speak in order for the access to be meaningful. And I think this is one of the things that is important, is we need to move away from an English-first approach to developing systems and infrastructure. And when we deploy infrastructure into places where there isn't the internet, then we need to go with an UA by design approach so that it's not an English first approach. So, but I did have one particular, I guess, a question for especially for Alison and maybe for Sabrina as well. We know that the challenges are difficult, and we know that this issue of universal acceptance is a little bit of a long tail issue as well. Does the Government of Canada have a roadmap to become fully, for your systems? You mentioned many systems, I understand. Do you have a roadmap to make all the government systems universal acceptance ready? And also, I guess, are the procurements, contracts and tenders and those kind of things, have they started to include universal acceptance requirements, even not immediate requirements, but at least the providers or the system integrators that provide services to the Government of Canada have to have a roadmap in place for UA readiness? And sort of the same question to CIRA and .ca.
Yeah, perfectly reasonable question. I want so badly to say, yes, of course we have a roadmap, and I will now tell you it's 12 points, but I can't do that. Like many other governments, we're still in the very early phases of trying to figure out how to integrate UA by design into the processes that we have. I will say something very glib as a white lady up here, but I have an apostrophe in my name, and the number of government and non-government systems that just absolutely freak out when I have an apostrophe in my name. And then I give thought to my Francophone colleagues who have accents in their name, Indigenous colleagues who have different kinds of letters in their names. The extent of the work that needs to be done is huge. And I think the focus that we have on the Canadian side currently is working with the international community to establish the kind of standards and to establish the roadmaps and enabling factors that will then allow us at the domestic level to implement. I think that's really where at least my team's focus is for the time being. But you're right that as we've I think made leaps and bounds in the last little while in making Government of Canada content particularly compliant with international standards related to accessibility. UA is kind of the next frontier of that, of making sure that then not only are you able to access it from a screen reader, but also that you're able to access it in the language of your preference and even in the script of your preference. So yeah, not a roadmap yet, but I promise we'll continue to work on it.
Thank you, Alice. Sabrina, do you want to comment?
Thanks, Edmund. Maybe not a roadmap specifically per se, but CIRA, of course, offers domains for 10 years, CIRA has offered domains to French language speakers as well. Recognize that, of course, in Canada, there are many, many other languages spoken too. At this stage, we're a part of the dialogue within the CCNSO community. So we recently joined the Universal Acceptance Committee, where we're glad to engage with our colleagues on this issue and stay abreast of monitor developments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. I don't know if anyone from the floor wants to make any other comment or any online. Yes, Ellen, please.
Thanks very much. There's actually lots of chatter online. There are 3 questions. So I might just combine and ask 2 now, and hopefully we'll have time to get to the 3rd, but also give the opportunity to those on the floor. So I think the first question is a great one, and it could be answered by anyone on the panel. This person is asking, has the issue of acceptance been addressed? What is the meaning of it in the view of the panelists? So in terms of the definition of universal acceptance, particularly that acceptance part. And then the second question, so this question, fundamentally, it is coders and developers who underpin implementation of UA, UTF-8, and all linguistic technologies. There is not enough effort being carried out to involve these stakeholders. How to advance this question, being the involvement of stakeholders and also offering warm regards to all UA friends on the floor and remotely. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Since we are our time is ending, I'll suggest that we do a round with all speakers so that you can react on the questions and probably just do your final remarks. Can we start maybe in the same order? Alison, if you want to.
Always happy to. That sounds good. I'll maybe focus on the first part of the question related to the kind of definition of acceptance, with the caveat that I'm a year into my job of learning about the internet alone. So universal acceptance is maybe I'm not the expert in it, but I'm happy to speak a little bit about my sort of understanding of it and how it's arisen in our team's work. I think one of the frameworks in which I think about, especially the title of our panel today of universal acceptance and universal accessibility, is in the kind of supply side versus demand side, which is to say that universal acceptance is really focused on the supply side. How do we ensure that different languages and that different scripts, different diacritics are able to be accepted by the technical systems as people wish to use them? And then there's a universal access or a universal accessibility perspective that is more on the demand side, which is how do we ensure that folks from a host of different communities and from a host of different regions have the skills and the capacity and the interest and the affordable means to be able to engage with digital systems. I think when we're talking about, having the technical means to be able to accept different types of scripts, if we are talking about communities then that don't have affordable access to broadband, it's not super helpful for them to know that if they have an email address with a non-English diacritic that it'll be accepted. That's not maybe the most pressing issue for them at that point. So I think that there's two kinds of sides to it, and the acceptance piece is really on that supply side, but the accessibility piece is critical as well.
Thank you, Alice. So Andrew, if you can, a 1 minute comment so that we can close.
So I want to associate myself fully on that question with Alison's view so that I don't have to get into the technicalities based on the maturity model that Canada has been through. My parting shot, I'll go to my opening hypothesis. And I'll read it again. There can be no UA and digital rights without a meaningful internet. However, I want to end with some positivity and pragmatism. Based on all the opening comments we had this morning, we have made progress, ladies and gentlemen. A lot remains to be done. We have to stay vigilant to ensure we leave no one behind. As long as we stay collaborative and keep this multi-stakeholder model bottom up, we shall prevail. Why do I say this? While my parents who are alive used the very old telephone, you had one piece here and one piece here, I can now send my mom a WhatsApp. This is progress. And they are very elderly. It can only get better. I thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Phil, if your 1 minute comment, Phil, can you take the floor?
Bottom up is right. And we're thinking about truly grassroots influences and input into the design and architecture of these systems that underpin the internet. And so in terms of UA, I have a little note I wanted to make here, was just that, like, UA can be, or universal acceptance, it can be a tool and one piece of the puzzle in protecting, promoting, revitalizing, or reclaiming Indigenous languages, many of which are endangered, not just in Canada, but all over. And so if you're thinking about universal acceptance, you can even go beyond that and talk about keyboards, spell checkers, and voice assistants. And many Indigenous languages promote oral tradition and still do so. And how can we think about that in having and ensuring that our voices can be used to navigate the internet and use and apply digital technology? And there was a question in the chat about the coders who kind of build this stuff. and I attended a meeting not too long ago with like a year ago, with computer scientists who were talking about digital inclusion with First Nations in Canada. And there was this, it's like, you guys are the builders of the internet and the architects of the internet. And it's almost like, is there a Hippocratic oath in place to ensure that you're building tools that really reflect and embody the values of these different heterogeneous genius communities across the world over, not just Native people, but all of us. So if we want this to be a really kind of diverse and multicultural, so to speak, tool, then we really need to work hard to make sure that we're all included in making it and making it a bottom-up tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Kazar, over to you.
Yeah, I won't take much of your time. I believe universal acceptance or access is not just with the technical or infrastructural promises, but how do we ensure that the language is not a barrier, gender inequalities are not there, and governance failures do not stop people from accessing internet. So ensuring that it's equal and accessible for everyone in their own language. I think AI is a wonderful opportunity if we see from that perspective that could solve a lot of problems that otherwise would have taken us years to. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And Sabrina, over to you.
Sure. I think I'll just refer to a term that you used at the beginning, Fabio, which is meaningful connectivity. So I think just to tie it back, those are something that resonates. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it was a very insightful discussion, and it's interesting to see that by your contributions that I started talking about the different layers that sometimes we discuss in the internet governance, but then Alison bring the thing of supply and demand, so you can think now the complexity. And of course, there are technical issues, there are social demographic issues. We talk about gender, we talk about ethnicity, age. Age is a key topic for elderly versus children, so how to deal with that. Of course, the economic barriers in being from the global south is very relevant to talk about affordability, and I think it's a key discussion especially when we are trying to connect the most vulnerable part of the population now, which is now still disconnected. Is, for instance, the debate that we face, for instance, in the poverty discussion. So should we provide a minimum connectivity or minimal types of device so that people can connect? So this is a discussion that society will need to face. Of course, digital literacy was also mentioned. This is key. It's impossible to talk just about devices and connectivity without this dimension of digital literacy. And I would change by, finally, I think lots of people mention trust and safety. So this is another key issue, and especially when it comes to now with AI and datafication of several aspects of our lives, how trust can be built in this environment is another thing that I think is key for us. So I hope this is useful for you in the audience, online and here, and thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you.